the co-chapter leaders for this chapter. This is our quarterly meeting. It is a pushback from August. Today, we're doing September. We are hosted by MySec, and we are sponsored by Uber Ether. Thanks, Uber Ether, for sponsoring us with the Zoom channel. We appreciate it very much. And MySec, there's also they're hosting us as well, so thank you. Going to do a few announcements with them. They meet. This is basically the Southfield chapter that we're taking over. They meet the second Thursday of every month. They also have a social that is the last Thursday of the month, I believe. I don't know if they're doing a social. They also had a barbecue that was supposed to be scheduled this Saturday. That's canceled. If anyone was planning to do that, we're all just incredibly busy. There's the Jackson chapter meeting that is going to meet on the next Tuesday on the 14th. They meet the second Tuesday of every month. I don't see anything else on the calendar. They also have a social that's on the 28th. Oh, looks like there's an Ann Arbor meeting that meets on the second Monday. That's scheduled for this 13th. And yeah, they have respective socials that are on the 27th for Ann Arbor and the 28th for Jackson. So thank you for our sponsors. And without further ado, we have our speaker. It's Nato Riley. He is going to be talking about the power of contextual perimeter defense. Thank you, Nato, for giving us a talk. Go ahead, and if you want to do any shameful plugs, go ahead. Perimeter defense. Thank you, Nato, for.
So since I am here to represent Blumira today, so I might as well plug that Blumira is. And actually, I like Blumira, so because that's not to say about all of the brands that I've talked to at some point. And so like, I'm going to tell you some really neat stuff, because when we're talking about like cybersecurity and application development and things like that, it's pretty important to figure out like how are we going to manage our infrastructure and kind of keep everything together and then also keep it safe. And so I am an integrations engineer at Blumira. I do other things as well, and so I have like a YouTube channel and some other stuff. So that's some stuff that I'm known to do. I also build applications, and I teach people how to build applications. And so that's one of the things that I do on the side as well. So one of the things that we run into just like in teams in general, and there are a lot of, especially if you're in the mid-size to like medium to small business size working in tech, you probably, even if you're at a large company, you probably have small teams or small huddles, and then you just have a whole lot going on all the time. And if you're building who knows what application, or whether you're working in IT, housing the infrastructure that all the developers work with, or if you're one of the developers on either side of the house, it's usually fairly chaotic. And usually everyone has some very important responsibility where if that one piece of the machine stops, something really bad's going to happen. And so when building applications, you have other hazards beyond just like security to navigate already. And then on top of that, what you don't want is to have something where you're already trying to work on a project, and now you have some kind of outlier or advanced persistent threat, or even if it's something like malware, that gets to be annoying either way, because anything that basically stops you from being able to get to your projects when it's already crazy enough tends to be a little frustrating. So one of the things that we've put a lot of time into, because I come from working with like SIM, where if you're trying to be like compliant, and you do have all of these other things going on, but you also have to get the same kinds of regulations that you have to meet for things like PCI or HIPAA, then you don't really have time to deal with your development projects and build a SIM at the exact same time. Usually there's just not enough time in a day. And so because I do like a lot of development, just like other projects in general, it's beneficial that if I can just put all of my time into the things that I do best and not have to go learn some other new technology, it's great. And then I can go ahead and focus on just doing what I prefer to do. And then if someone else likes doing security, then maybe I'll let them make that decision. But it's one of those things where there's not enough time for everything. So perimeter defense, kind of getting into like, if you're trying to like protect an application or a project that you're developing, like perimeter defense is basically like that house. Because if an individual in a home is pretty much like an application, like if you or I or some other anyone anywhere is running around and go inside of some infrastructure, right? Like a building, a skyscraper, maybe there's lots of offices in there, maybe they're nicely contained, maybe they're segmented out. But perimeter defense has to do with how is the defense, and with technology and systems and nodes and applications are kind of like the people that are moving around or interacting within the buildings, things like that. And so if we're trying to keep our applications safe, inevitably we're going to have different types of vulnerabilities on different types of applications. And so if we have all of this, especially if we do custom development, we're going to probably have who knows what going on. But if we're doing something that's a little more specific and not, some larger scale projects tend to kind of branch out into multiple different types of technologies. And some things might be focused where you might have a platform that's built purely with, say, JavaScript and Golang, and that's the primary code base for something. But regardless of what you're using, you want to know what the vulnerabilities are of your code base. But then the perimeter defense is, well, if we know what our vulnerabilities are, how do we protect those vulnerabilities, right? And so in terms of like, if we're thinking about ports, we have to know how ports work if we're going to try to work with, say, something like Docker, for example. And if we don't know how our ports work, if we're trying to work with Docker, then we can't even figure out how to access, say, port 9000 to access the tool that lets us access our apps, or whatever port might have been used for something to let us do something like that, right? So if we know what all of these things are, and we know that we have, say, things that we want to prevent intrusion from, so that's like intrusion prevention, intrusion detection, all that good stuff. If we're trying to make sure that we know that something's happening before it happens, we do eventually end up with lots of different types of devices, and not just one way or one means of trying to monitor our perimeters, right? So maybe nowadays, not only do we have to have like to know like where all of our entry points are, but maybe if we're adding, say, like IPS, IDS, or some of these other technologies to all of our perimeter defenses, all those good things, it's kind of like manning the walls, and it starts to get a little out of control. So inevitably, like our applications, everything that's outside, we still want to keep that safe. And our applications, like if you're monitoring your code, you would know if someone's like coming in and out, hopefully. Now, if it's your home and it's not like a whole town or something like that with gates or something, if it's your house, you probably have an idea if someone walked in the front door. And hopefully, if the back door is not locked, you know if someone will walk in the back door of your home. And so if we're trying to keep an application safe, most applications in this modern day have some form of a vulnerability or some form of something that we want to block or protect. And usually, if we're trying to make sure that we know what those things are, we still don't have time to necessarily sit and watch those things, though. There's a reason why we set up like cameras on our front door, because you're not going to sit and just watch your front door. You're going to set up like a camera. Well, maybe I'm sure someone does, so I can't say that. I've met someone who always seemed to be sitting out on the porch. Always. I'm sure they always know who's at the front door. But if that's not you or me, then that's not the case. And the same goes for like all of our technologies. If we have an antivirus on our system, we don't sit there and look at the antivirus logs and be like, what's going on with our antivirus today? Most of the time, we just forget that there's an antivirus on there in the first place. And regardless of what you have in your environmental defense around whatever you're trying to build for like an application, something along those lines, you can get a lot of valuable data out of different types of technologies like endpoint detection. And then, of course, there's like the broadened concept of endpoint detection, which is like XDR, with all the different terms these days. But either way, it's all about perimeter defense. understanding like what might be vulnerable where, and then if something eventful, and if it's eventful, hopefully like if it's a good eventful, like, hey, we got lots of business today, we want lots of business, but oh, we don't want the attacks though, and those we want to know when we're getting a negative event versus say like a sale. Just like we want to know when we get a sale, we want to know when we have something to react that's going to prevent a sale or prevent our business from operating, which is going to shut down things that are going to cause other problems in our business. And especially, you know, if we're productizing applications and all that, because it's a complicated effort. It's usually lots of people who need to know lots of things really well, so well that it probably took like 10 years for every single one of them to become masters at the level that they are, because it's complicated. You know, so logs from every single side of security. Overall, there's a lot of activity when we're trying to monitor more than say like one small team. Like maybe like if it's a company of like 2 people, that's much easier to monitor. But the minute you have say like 100 people in a company, all of a sudden that's a lot to monitor, just to kind of make sure that like everyone who's working on the same project or working on the same thing or working within this company, making sure that everyone's going to effectively be safe and secure. So those are some things that we just want to like consider when it comes down to just like application security in general, and some other things that come down to application security. Because like, let's say that you're working on a team where you're trying to make sure that you're identifying the things that are going to pose a threat to your company versus something that's going to expose, say, a potential fault that could also be interruptive at a business, which both can be things that are very important to watch and very important things to monitor. And so everything I've been talking about in the context of, say, if you take logs and you're collecting logs that have information about systems, right? And the use case for collecting that data is for the sake of security. And you're trying to just basically effectively make sure that an environment or individuals or the work that those individuals work on, or effectively their code, make sure that all of that's safe and secure. Like that security information event management is what that term is called. And that's effectively SIM. It's like, so if we have all this information and maybe we do end up having, you know, XDR and some other means of detecting our perimeter information, like maybe we're running like Carbon Black, and maybe we have like Duo security for our 2-factor authentication, and we've got some Active Directory floating around. We've got all these systems, and we're trying to make sure that these systems are all secure. What are we securing in those systems is applications, right? And if we're trying to make sure that those applications are safe, there's a beginning that starts with knowing when someone has crossed those gates, making our infrastructure, our software that's inside of our tools secure, versus say like debugging on the other hand, if we're talking about looking at logging data for the sake of security versus looking at logging data for the sake of debugging. Debugging goes back to, you want to have lots of amounts of information where you're trying to figure out how to solve a particular bug or some situation that you have some idea or goal around. So you know what this idea is, you know what this goal is, and then there's some reverse engineering to a specific goal that's involved when we're thinking about like debugging with logs. And it's interesting. The reason why I'm talking about this is because these technologies get confused in the like application development space. And it's also interesting because they can be used interchangeably sometimes. You can sometimes use tools that are used for debugging for security, and you can use tools that are used for security to debug as a result. And so it can like muddy the waters. But as developers, it does give us an interest in that there is some capacity that the same data that we might use for debugging or for security, it might be the same data set. We might be able to get insights for either or out of the same chunk of information, which is say, hey, I want to know what's going on with my environment, whether it's about like bugs or something along those lines. But I guess what it really comes down to is if you're trying to get value out of big data and you're trying to get value out of something like logs, if you don't know what goal you're trying to accomplish with digging through massive amounts of data, you're probably not going to get far with it, or you're probably not going to get some kind of result that's tangible or that's going to kind of help anyone kind of like work through some things. So that's kind of a little bit of me just kind of jumping right into like what I do at Blumira anyways. So some other things that we kind of focus on at Blumira is in terms of trying to make things a little more reasonable for people who are trying to get projects out there. Once again, oftentimes, if someone is trying to develop something, you probably don't necessarily want to put your time into something else on top of whatever else you're already doing. Or if you don't want to have to necessarily hire an entire person or an entire team or outsource some entire security SOC just to make sure that your company now suddenly has a security presence, because getting secure is like a really expensive and really complicated wish that sometimes is a lot harder to like, just you can't just suddenly be secure. It like the world doesn't just work that way. It's like a light switch. And so it really does come down to, it becomes a very expensive endeavor, whether it's around labor or anything else like that. I guess, are there any thoughts or questions so far as I'm talking about some of this?
Well, in the spirit of OWASP, there's more than just Blumira. Granted, Blumira does kind of have their own way of doing things, but there's other there's other things there for logging, like Logstash and ELK and
oh
no, should I mention the elephant in the room, Splunk?
Oh yeah. There's all kinds of options out there.
Yeah.
And we're technically not a Splunk competitor, because Splunk is a data science platform. And that goes back to what I was talking about earlier, where Splunk can be used, and very specifically, because I use Splunk, by the way, if that might sound confusing, but because I work for a company that's logging based. And so if we're thinking about, say, debugging and security, there's a reason why we can do both at the same time with the same heap of state. And that's a very good thing to outline, because whether you're using, it doesn't matter if you're using Splunk or Logstash, because ELK Stash includes Logstash, you use Elastic. You can even use Loki. I don't know if anyone's used Loki. Loki's my favorite one to do at least debugging with these days. Because debug, like, I don't know, has anyone in here tried Prometheus with Loki? It's a neat one if you haven't. It's it's part of the Grafana suite. Anyways, I guess I should not. Well, I'll go through the presentation stuff too, but I get excited about that stuff. I've been developing sim stuff for a long time, and I do enjoy it. If I guess is a weird thing. So after I get through some of this, if anyone wants to nerd out about some of that stuff, like I'll even tell you how to build some stuff. Like I'll tell you how to build a logging station that'll start working within like 10 minutes. At the end of this, if anyone wanted to know if we have time, stuff like that. But I know I gotta get through the things I said I would. So like Blumira is like end-to-end like detection response system. The thing that our system focuses on the most is we primarily build out rules and build out stuff. So I would say Blumira is mostly like research and labor. And so that's pretty much what Blumira is. It's research and labor. And so basically you get a thing that allows us to collect data at Blumira. And then on the other side, then we get to go and make sure that you get rules and detections set up and integrated for individuals, whoever is using the platform, but based on whatever someone's stack is. And it works in tandem with other things too. So if you have other sets of data, it's important to know where your data is in the first place. So whatever data that you want to have your data inventory, get that data to a centralized location. And with Blumira, then we take that information and build rules and do parsing for you. And then basically anything else that's coming out, like new threats, things like that, we take care of all the research and implementation of all of those things. behind the scenes. So in terms of like tuning, we do all the tuning. We do all of the like rule building and implementation. We even give you like an account manager. And so like in terms of like validation, that's what we do a lot of too. So I guess that's a lot about like my work day too, is I get to spend a lot of time just seeing like what's going on with the latest threats and stuff. And then we have the research team gets a lot more time into that stuff because I'm a lot more like dealing with integrations and how integrations work with different types of things, which I do just in general because I build applications in general. And so like in terms of how Blumira then manages, let's say that you do have a threat and you have something that has been identified by what our team's built, then we give you a playbook with full workflows on what you can do to resolve the situation. So then that way you also don't necessarily have to spend as much time trying to figure out how to remediate an issue. So not only do we take all of that tuning off, but we try to provide like suggestions and insights as to what might solve a certain threat or whatever you're running into. And so really, I would say like our research or our knowledge base is really the thing that we put everything into, which includes, research and insights around Microsoft Azure, Active Directory, included for whether it's Active Directory on-prem or in Azure, things like Okta, Duo Security, Carbon Black, quite a few. And then we're adding different things all the time, but right now this is kind of where our suite is. And so right now we're always just trying to figure out what's going to be most helpful to those that we focus on trying to deliver services to, which is mostly like smaller companies who have smaller teams, mostly people who don't have development power or time, one of those two things. If someone has more of a development presence, I would say something that's going to give you more customization is going to be some of those other options out there, which there are quite a lot, and you can explore. We can always talk about like what are the differences between those. I would say like the closest comparison to something like Blumira is like an Arctic wolf type of thing or something along those lines. But others, they give you more of like a platform that you have to put time into and mold. So it's really selling something that's, I guess, what's selling is not the platform itself so much as the knowledge base and the research and the labor that goes into that. So it's one of those things that if anyone does want to try it, we do let folks just go ahead and try Blumira for free as well. And it's the way that I would kind of position Blumira compared to others. It's the one that if someone wants a set it and forget it SIM, that would be Blumira. If someone doesn't want a set it and forget it SIM, where they want to be able to do more customization and massaging of the data and all of those things, and you want to like do deep dives, and let's say that you do want to do a combination of debugging, because high development powered entities have a different level of developmental power, let's be honest. If you have the developmental capacity to manage debugging methodologies with all of this stuff, you can combine it all if you have a big enough team. But really, if you don't, then we also focus on being part of the team and an extension of helping you kind of integrate whatever you're working on from a security standpoint to take that aspect off of those who don't particularly want that part of it. And then anyone else who has the capacity or just an option that they want to take for other things, it's kind of where we sit in things. So I guess, does anyone have any questions about Blumira specifically, or any questions about just SIM in general? Like I come from more like, I come from like developing parts of Logarithm. I've done development with people, the Splunk team. I've done development with people who Rapid7. I've done development with, you name it, I've probably done development with them. Like this is a thing that I do. So don't be shy about questions. I am a strange creature that I am, and I'm not shy about it. So I'm more than happy to explore any of that if any of you do have any questions about any of that.
Well, I would say, being at OWASP, do you have much interaction with some more of the open source log tooling that's out there?
Yeah. I would say that the two that are pretty neat to work with in general is, I would say, so ELK Stack is pretty well known. I don't know if anyone's familiar with like cloud native, but then there's basically Grafana Labs has a new open source logging structure that is so it's Grafana, Loki, and Prometheus are the ones, which you could certainly find that on Grafana's like website, like Grafana Labs and all that good stuff. And it's also a great way to learn SIM too. Like if you're trying to learn SIM, I would not recommend spending money on learning this stuff. Like if you want to, like if you're running a business and you just don't have time and stuff like that, like that's one thing. Like if you have the ability to build something, let's say like ELK Stack or Grafana, you can make really dynamic. I really like the way that they do the dashboards compared to like ELK Stack. They're very similar. I would say that they both use like the Kibana-esque drill down. Has anyone used the Loki stack? Well, I guess I asked that earlier. Is anyone familiar with ELK Stack in here?
I can speak for me and Ollie that we have, but I don't know about everybody else. It's typically dev focused in this crew.
That makes sense. I guess I would have a question in interest. Would you say that the deployment of ELK Stack is, I guess if someone's trying to learn SIM, would you think that would be a decent one to learn on from your experience? Because I know that I would say that Loki is probably a pretty good one to learn with, but how did you feel about the other one?
Yeah, it is. It's the just the front end, true pretty much for all open source. The real work is all getting it up, setting up, configuring it, and getting everything connected. And once you have that, it learning that whole portion of it from there is great. Just because you see everything, and then I think it helps when you have a little bit more of a live environment than your own kind of virtual lab. Because seeing that, then you start to kind of tune it. Really, the true thing to all SIMs is tuning it. What is your actual threat scenario? What does that actually look like? What are you concerned about? And especially for devs, what are you concerned about? They're attacking your web app that you have. And what does that actually look like? It's the OWASP top 10. You got to be looking for things that are, SQL injection, cross-site scripting, stuff like that, and start trying to look for some of those hallmarks. But you can also start looking for a directory traversal, and even things where people just kind of broad scanning. Like, hey, so you have a web app, but someone's scanning you with like WordPress stuff. Okay, that may be a potential adversary. You probably want to they continue doing that, just maybe block them, because who knows what they're trying to do. It can't be anything good.
A fun one that goes if you're using the Kibana, because you can watch the app, you can set Kibana to refresh every 5 minutes in the logger and just set it to just monitor what you're working on. It's pretty neat if you take, say, Nmap and OWASP Zap, if you're trying to just do some just perimeter scans. Have you gotten to play with OWASP Zap logging much?
Well, I mean, I'm the code chair, so yeah, I've played with Zap a ton of times.
You can make some pretty sweet dashboards, because it's I mean, that's kind of what it's all about too. Because if you are building your own thing, you can really massage out of the data really what you want out of it. Especially if you're taking a custom platform, and you can just about anything you can do with Splunk, you can do with ELK Stack. And Loki and ELK Stack are pretty similar. ELK Stack you can probably find more to Google. So if you're really, 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 really new to some of these computing technologies, sometimes having something that is easy to find the most information about is helpful. Because the challenge with, say, platforms like Splunk, you can start getting the free edition of it and start learning it. And then by the time you want to do anything with it, then you're just going to get charged. But if you're doing any actual real world modeling, from a budgetary standpoint perspective, all that good stuff, you don't want to be spending Splunk money on your development time, ideally, and that gets complicated in your pipeline. But things like ELK Stack, like once you have something like built out and you have some isolated data that is, I mean, it's going to trigger the way that it triggers once you've gotten it going one way or another. I mean, things get updated and things sometimes have to be modified and stuff like that. But like custom shop, you can do quite a bit and like do like visual pen tests and stuff with ELK Stack. So ELK Stack, you can even do like cool red teaming things with that.
So I guess we could you up for opening it up to the rest of the group here to just kind of do seminar style?
Yeah, totally.
Right. I guess I'll push something out to the devs that are here is especially with logging, you guys do you find it, is it difficult to try and come up with your own way because the logging is really on you when it comes to your app. There's no set standard of what is okay and what is not. You need to design, basically what should I log, what is important in your app. You guys find it like difficult to try to do that? I know documentation is always the bane of existence of devs. Like it's self-documenting code. It's a web app. It's perfectly explanatory of what it's supposed to do and how to use it. Do you find the same kind of issues with logging, or is that just more, what I guess I'm curious, what are the issues with the devs that are here? What are your logging woes? Do you not know what to put in there? Is your security staff just like mute and doesn't tell you what they need? So I throw it out to the rest of the guys here. And Kevin, don't make me call your name out because I might.
Yeah, I'm definitely not a dev by any means, but I'm more on the security side and kind of system administration. But any recommendations that you could provide to pass along to my development team, I think that I'm just kind of looking at different ways to better secure and log, and just kind of learn all the things.
Yeah, and I'm happy to talk about that. So like just some like basics even in terms of logging is figuring out ways to start centralizing things, or even just getting an inventory of everything that you're trying to secure first if you haven't, I guess, fully fleshed that out, and if you have like a good sound inventory of like systems that you're trying to build defense for, there are some good frameworks that you can work with that have a lot of guidance in them. A lot of them are kind of based on NIST. And I would say like things like there's something called CSF, which is like cybersecurity framework. It's based on NIST, so it's a NIST framework. That would be a good like high level, like here are some concepts around like what would be considered, I guess, especially from a compliance standpoint, because technically it's all compliance in that listing. And security is more than some compliance, because security is more about making sure that, I mean, of course, it includes making sure that you're compliant, all that good stuff. But I would say starting with some of that and then figuring out what your highest risk systems are and figuring out like what would you need, like what do you want to keep safe the most, and kind of prioritizing that out first. Because I guess, have you gone that far with some of it?
Not necessarily. I think, I have been looking at some ELK Stack stuff, and then Greylog is another one we've been looking at. So I think we're just trying to basically spin something up that we can do kind of like a proof of concept.
Oh, I would spin up an ELK POC. That would be pretty. And then grab like a good framework as a reference point, and something like a ELK Stack, and then how to meet certain requirements. I think that'd be a pretty good way to just see what works. If you're just trying to get like a basic something out there.
Okay. Thanks.
Cool thing about ELK Stack, I'll say, even though ELK Stack has if there's certain things you don't like about ELK Stack, it's kind of a rip and replace stack too. And a lot of stacks kind of work that way, but if there's a piece of it, like let's say that the logging does weird things, then maybe explore alternatives to the one part of the stack you don't like, versus the entire stack, and you might find interesting results. But I would say start with one basic stack first in general, and don't necessarily get too creative right away. See what you think. And then if you'll inevitably run into things that you wish could be a certain way. Honestly, that's the power of open source right there, is the rip and replace power, if we're going to be honest. Because I think one thing that can supercharge working with open source more is if you get too shy with experimentation, that can end up wasting a lot of time. But if you do try out ELK Stack and you got it going for a good like 2 months, 3 months, and it's looking stable, you're feeling pretty good about what you're getting out of it or something like that. Like I said, you're going to by then have an idea of some things that maybe you don't like. And sometimes it's sometimes easier than you might think to kind of swap pieces of that. Any other questions about, I guess, options that might be out there?
Hi, I had a quick question. I know that OAuth just updated, I think, the top 10 list. And so I was just curious what techniques or what findings would be useful for the first one. I think is broken access control. That's now number one.
I would put access up there. Anything that has to do with access controls would be pretty high priority. If you're talking about an environment that has an LDAP or an Active Directory, you get like Kerberos access logging. Other types of anything that gives you access logging is viable, if that answers the question, like two-factor authentication tools, anything like that.
I might posit a big thing is don't worry about those who are failing to log in. Look at those who are logging in, and then looking at the metadata around that. If the person is constantly logging at 8 in the morning and then logs off at like end of day 4 or 5 p.m. and they log in at 3 in the morning, okay,
right,
that's outside your typical behavior. That's a thing to look into, and maybe not set an alarm. Maybe there's an emergency. Maybe they're logging in because there's something going on, and you need to start kind of collecting contextual information around that, and and then have clear ways of communicating to their management staff of saying, "Hey, we just saw this behavior." But yeah, that definitely look at broken access control. A lot of that is just people writing bad login methodology. And we see that even with the big dogs that are out there where, what was it? Someone who just had, if you just didn't even put a password in or didn't even put an account, you just got root access. Mm-hmm. I don't want to name names, that'd just be bad. But that's what you want to look for is weird behavior on the login. Things you wouldn't typically look for, you wouldn't normally see. Like you see a hash and this time you don't see a hash and someone there's a login, that's a problem.
And then you can correlate a lot from there too, because you can do root cause from there. And those are outstanding insights, by the way. And it's because anytime you identify one thing, then there's probably more to contextualize from there and correlate on.
Yeah, just look for the deltas. And then really, like Nato says, you just got to sit there and you got to wait. You got to start to kind of get that baseline. That's the key to a SIM. So you can't tune it right then and there. You got to see what is coming in and then tune from there and figure out what's your normal and then what's your problematic.
And it's very unique to every company too. And I think you said it really well, because it's like, what's your normal? Like that says it so well, because it like every company has the way that they generally operate. Company builds a culture, and you can see it in a SIM because you can see kind of how that culture kind of plays out in the activity. And you definitely can tell that there are outliers too. It does take time. That's the other thing that's one thing that I would outline from that is it's not something that happens quickly. It's kind of a slow technology.
It's an incident response tool. So many people do that in DFIR. It's like, oh, we should start logging now. You should have started logging weeks ago.
Yeah.
I can say right now, if you don't have a logging solution, stand something up, even if it's rudimentary. Just start,
Anything.
Yeah. Getting any logs, putting in a central location, and then having that backed up it's going to help any kind of thing you're trying to figure out. I can tell you right now, it sucks going through Event Viewer in a Windows box, even through the EVTXs. It just sucks going through that crap without a central way to kind of correlate all this stuff. It just extends the DFR process that much longer, and that much more it's going to affect your company's bottom line that much longer, where you may not be able to come back up online.
And it's much harder to implement once your environment's bigger too. So it's like one of those things that if your inventory is still pretty, like not that many systems, like under 100 systems, like that's pretty easy. But then we start expanding, say like 100 systems and on, then it starts to get a little crazy. It gets really hard to implement.
I'm kind of curious going to some of the devs. Do we have any devs or is it just all security guys or all engineers? Wow, dead silence. That's great.
Not a developer either. Yeah, I'm more of a sysadmin.
Okay, I'm just trying to figure out how to steer the conversation, guys. It's not the Spanish Inquisition here. If you're a sysadmin or a security person, you're fine. You're among your people. You're in a good spot. You're welcome. Everybody's welcome here. It's just trying to give some questions to maybe some people who don't know questions to ask.
So I actually have a little question. It's a little outside the box for this. I'm looking for kind of a cloud native system for doing logging. It's mostly small, medium businesses, anywhere from 10 to 60, 70 endpoints and users. Do you have any insight or recommendations for something of that nature?
For cloud native open source, I would say go with the Grafana Loki Prometheus stack, which you can find on the Grafana website, and then it's just like LOKI. It's like ELK Stack, but it's cloud native. And you can use ELK Stack with cloud native stacks, but if you're using ELK Stack is a little easier in a monolithic environment. Yeah. And the Grafana Loki Prometheus stack is going to be a little easier in a cloud. I would say a lot easier in a cloud native stack. You could probably experiment with it. Once you figure out how to use it and you've played with it enough, you could spin it up in like 5 minutes. It's much faster to spin up than ELK Stack once you get used to it. If we go, well, it depends on how you're deploying ELK Stack too, I guess. But in a cloud native environment, anyways, if we're talking outside of the context of cloud native, things start to get a little different. It depends. But.
Gotcha. Okay, cool.
When dealing with cloud native, I feel like one of the, or at least from what I've seen, one of the hidden gotchas is like, okay, I just ingested X amount of data or processed or ran so many functions that crap, I did not anticipate my cloud bill to be high this month.
Right.
So that's, if you're checking for operational costs, that may be something to consider. And not just for that, but any of these cloud native type of solutions.
Sure. Yeah, that's definitely something to keep in mind. Everybody's heard the horror stories.
And it's a really good point too, because you do want to be mindful of what systems you deploy that on, because SIMs, if you guys aren't familiar with how much data they move, you can get a shocking bill in the cloud if you're trying to do that with like AWS. I would say very good insight. I would say if you're going to experiment with like Loki and stuff like that, maybe experiment in a Docker desktop environment because you can deploy it on Docker desktop just to play with it. You could even put it in a Docker and Docker container just to figure it out for free. And then a Docker and Docker container at least isolates your ports so that you don't have port conflicts on your local system if you're trying to do it that way. And I guess that's the fortunate thing about cloud native development is you can use a Docker and Docker container to model. Kubernetes takes too long, in my opinion. You can model with it, but I don't know. You can model faster with Docker. And then if you're doing it in AWS or Google Cloud Platform, do it in a single instance and not across multiple instances. So structure your nodes so that the stack is not across different instances, because that'll get really expensive if you have data moving across instances. Depending on the platform too, and which platform you're using, I know that they're slightly structured in the meter. You got to read the metering, I guess, depending on the platform you're using. But sometimes if you do it on one node or one single system for just like testing, sometimes it doesn't get as costly to just run the whole stack on a single node somewhere if you're doing cloud native testing. So I guess just consider how you do your modeling if you're doing cloud native, because cloud native can easily go from doing the exact same task for free that might otherwise cost $1,000 in a month.
Sure. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I was just curious, had anybody been able to actually tune the Splunk Enterprise SIM to be usable? Just curious. I didn't want to laugh at the end, but now you made me.
The problem is once you get it good, the challenge is surviving the turnover. That's where I always have trouble with those. Turnover is the worst on those. Documentation all day long and making it redeployable so you can redeploy things or get backups. I don't know. It can be interesting.
When you say turnover, you mean like when you're going from actual like employee turnover where you're trying to hand it off to somebody else or new engineers as promotion goes through, and then the next person is like, I don't even know what these dashboards mean.
Yes.
Yeah. I know exactly what Chopper is talking about, where we have a SOC and they're like a week late, a day short when it comes to responding to stuff. Like there's so much that's going into their SIM. It's, the dashboards need dashboards themselves. It's so much data. It's so hard to narrow it down. And, being the SOC, they're a group removed from what they're seeing, what ops is seeing, or what dev's seeing. So they don't really know what's pertinent. And especially when you have, also legacy stuff too. Like there's so many things, so much chop that can cause so much consternation on the SOC side. And again, like really, it's that whole tuning thing. Like any SIM, it's a matter of tuning, and that's a dialogue you have to have between ops and dev and security. And you have to chat. You have to say what is normal. This is what I'm seeing. Are these false positives? Are these positive positives? And just improve the communication between it. You can't be us versus them. It's all us. And that's really where the power of it isn't all in the it's the communication and cross between those teams, and it's not in the security team alone. We can't figure it out by ourselves. Yeah, I'd love to, but we can't.
Like that, I mean, that says it really well, because it's just a huge effort and a huge machine, and it's like one of those things, especially when you get into enterprise. Yeah, it's huge.
Well, not even just the effort. I just think time alone. I mean, just if you're looking at SOC people, right? SOC analysts or even SOC managers, the amount of time that they're dedicated, doing other tasks. And I've been in information security for a while. I have not yet met a information security group that said, oh yeah, I have time to work on this, or yeah, I have time to you know what I mean? Well,
You don't need sleep. What are you talking about?
Exactly. And so I remember you kind of mentioned you know, a sim that works out of box. Like that will be such a dream state, right? But I know that that will never happen with the amount of information you know, that just gets put out there that security alone sees. And then when you look at developers you know, on that side of the house and all the information that they're processing and using, you know, that's huge as well. And so just right there alone, two groups of people, you know, dealing with a lot of work, multiple responsibilities, you know, the time to actually like go through the sim, like I almost kind of don't like where it's where I remember a CISO saying like, oh yeah, throw a sim on there and you'll be, you know, you're well on your way to establish your security team or you know, your security profile or stature. I was just like, oh gosh, that's so not it right there.
It's not a light switch.
That's exactly. I never like that, but I feel like sims are kind of treated in that way.
It's like all the pizza boxes before this. It's just another pizza box for all the CISOs and stuff. Just throw that in the rack. It's good. It'll do things, magical things, solve the problem.
Oh yeah, I mean it's there's a very reason why it's like if no matter how you're buying sims, there's someone somewhere who has to do the ocean of labor. The question is, in which way, where does this one put the ocean of labor? Because it's, you know, because I think there's just no escaping that. It's that's sim. It is a lot of work.
Yeah, no matter how you cut it, the cost is always going to be the highest in the overhead. It's going to be your crew tuning it, because I mean, all right, bad for me to say from OWASP Pro chapter leader, but Blumira does a really solid job when it comes to the threat stuff, like what you guys normally see. But the problem is you can't just give it to any company and here solve my problem. It's every company is different. Everybody's doing development a little different. Their logs are a little different. Their architecture is just a little different. So you can't just drop any SIM in place and it's going to solve all your problems. There's always a tuning process. The thing is, it's just like your security. It's just like your IT. It never stands still. You always have to be turning the knob a little left, a little right, and always improving a little bit.
Make sure the loggers are running.
Yeah. Make sure your auditing is actually right. It's always a nightmare when you start migrating from one thing to another, going 2016 to 2019. Okay, make sure your auditing is correct there and everything is done as it should be. I mean, that's a whole nother nightmare there. It's SQL auditing. It's just
SQL auditing. I don't like doing it.
It's I mean, you think you have enough noise right now, like it's just overwhelming. Wait till you turn on SQL auditing and you see every single SQL statement that is occurring, every select, every update, every insert.
Firewalls are terrifying.
Your SOC will just scream at you, like, what is all this garbage?
Yeah, SIM, no matter what you do with SIM in general, it's going to cost a lot somewhere. It's going to cost a lot in someone's labor somewhere, whoever's labor ends up getting it. Like at Blumira, we provide like a TAM and we provide labor and things like that, but it still goes back to they have to have time to develop things too. And so you're still going to have to wait for someone or pay for someone, no matter what SIM you go with. And that's I think I would say, like, in SIM as a technology, I'm not so sure that there's any escaping, not anytime soon, maybe someday, but right now in its current state of like SIM, what is SIM? SIM is a large platform-based technology that's designed for a lot of people to be involved in if it's going to work successfully one way or another.
And I'm happy to dive deeper into your Splunk issue, because it's a bit surprising to say when you hear the big dog Splunk is, I'm having problems with that. But
no, Splunk is definitely not a magic bullet by any means.
Nothing is a silver bullet in security. That's the problem. Is the CISO is always changing. Management at that level just wants to throw money at a problem and make it go away, and that's not how this works. We need new staff, and you can't just hire junior staff. You got to hire senior staff that's been in the field and knows what they're doing, knows what they're looking at. You just throw another human warm blood body in front of the SIM, and it's like, no, this will never work. They don't know what they're looking at.
Yeah.
It's like, here, learn French. Do you have a dictionary? No, do it without a dictionary. Just learn French. God, how hard is it? It's just a language.
It's true.
Honestly, I think the first screen on Splunk ES, because it had like all the pictures and numbers, and it looks pleasing. Like, oh yeah, I want to see that. Okay, I'm sold. I feel like that's the hook right there. Like, okay, not mentioning the 50 tabs that's behind it, whatever the swim lanes and other that needs to be tweaked in order to like really utilize it effectively. No, I'm not even gonna say effectively, just to use it. Period.
Yeah. Like, I hate it when people try to like downsize whoever the development team is that's like managing one of these platforms. They're like, oh, it's been working really well, we can just downsize the team, right? It's like, wait, what? We can do what? That's always a fun conversation.
Yeah, and then especially for a lot of people working the SOC or people looking at all these alerts and trying to tweet. We suffer from burnout pretty bad. And this is definitely one of the causes of that.
Sleepless nights get to you eventually. It's true.
Yeah, having a newborn child does that as well.
I could definitely see that.
Oh.
I dread the day.
Choppers, are you guys using the Splunk Security Essentials, or are you just using vanilla Splunk?
I'm sorry, what was that?
So you were talking about Splunk. Some people just think Splunk in itself is a bit of just a SIM, but there's the add-ons. There's a Security Essentials add-on that's another billable thing, but that really helps bring that thing into like a full SIM feature suite. It's not just a log aggregation correlation tool. It really becomes that full SIM suite.
It has a pretty good course.
That's what I meant. I'm sorry, I had said the abbreviation Splunk ES. That's what I'm used to saying it, but that's what I meant. Splunk Enterprise Security.
I see.
That's the SIM add-on that Splunk offers. That makes you think, oh, hey, all this, I don't have to just look at the search and application page. I can actually go to a pre-made dashboard or something like that, right? And hey, look, I got something, but
yeah, I mean,
you're dealing with that.
It gets you up like 20% of the way when you haven't started anything yet. But I feel like the search tool, as much as it's a pain in the ass, it's like one of the most powerful pieces of it is getting that a Splunk, and then building your own like custom alerts off of that with your own environment. It sucks. It's painful, but it's getting that. You've got to be an expert in your company to really to narrow down and tune that thing. And yes, it's going to be sleepless nights. Yes, it's going to be hard. And you just got to tell your management staff, like, I'm going to need a whole crap ton of time to do this. And then, it's on you to play defense for me and to schedule my time so someone isn't calling me in the middle of the night when I'm trying to actually get sleep, so I can actually like show up and do this stuff and tune it. Like, if you want me to do it, let me do it. Don't interrupt me with all the other kind of crap. Like, schedule my time, carve it up, give me 8 or 20 hours in a week to do this, and don't interrupt me. Don't give me help desk tickets. Don't do any of that kind of crap. It's on management you want this. This is your baby. This is your thing. You're going to drop it and place it. Let me do it. Let me configure it. It will not, it won't walk and talk by itself.
It's so true. I guess it's like a lot of app development, because it's like if you want to get the project out, like people need to learn to leave you. And I feel like people don't get that with development projects sometimes, because I have some other development project that's like unrelated to SIM, and like
wait, meetings don't help development. Like,
yeah,
if I have more meetings,
doesn't
that help the development process?
and then meetings about the meetings, right?
What if I just add more junior staff under you? Will that help with the development staff? Totally green, totally new to the company, have no idea what you guys are doing. Just throw more bodies at it. That solves the problem, right?
And wake up at 6 a.m. because we have this really early meeting in another time zone that we need you at. That really is just us listening to someone say something that's unrelated to your work.
Mm-hmm. Those 40, 50 people meetings, those are crucial.
Yeah, development life. But yeah, it's I guess it is an interesting thing, like articulating to those who aren't in the development space of like, because not everyone respects it either, because sometimes it just turns into like arguments with people who like don't get it. They're like, no, I'm a manager, so those companies I usually just like don't work with. But like some still, it's, even good companies can be a little challenging to talk through time scheduling with. But I guess after you do it a while, you kind of have to just lay it out to them. And then if they don't respect it, it's like, all right, no, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. And you got to gauge, it also, it's a little arch for me to say this. Information security market is really hot right now. So, and if you've been in a company and it feels like you're just yelling at a wall and they're not respecting you, and they're just like, just keep putting your nose at the grindstone. Mm-hmm. Our industry is new. It takes a lot of churn for someone, some men in management to realize we are doing this wrong. And we keep getting breached, and we keep, what are we doing wrong? Mm-hmm. And it's a matter of them sitting there and analyzing. We need management who knows what the hell they're doing. Yeah. And not just doing the same old business. You can't run it like a sales team. You can't run it like a marketing team. IT and security has to be run in a totally different mindset.
It's culture for sure. That's true. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, if you feel like it sucks and you're getting burned out, go somewhere else. Go someplace else that anything, take what you've learned from this job to know what questions you ask in the future job, and say, hey, what does my daily day look like? Does it end at 5? Am I going to get called at like 12 at night? And do I get to balance that out at the end of the week? And, are you bringing more people onto the staff that know what they're doing? Or is it just more tasking me with, oh, you got to train this person on top of doing all your daily tasks? And then there's this, new tool I need you to configure. And it's just piling on more and more of it. It's like, you don't need that noise. We need to constrain the problem. Can't just be throwing more at us. Sorry if I'm monopolizing that. I'm salty. I'm cranky. I've been through this kind of crap before. So it just irritates me to no end to just hear the same management problem again and again.
It is definitely complicated. And then it's because, I mean, there's a reason why I'll just move around and see what companies are like. But yeah, it's in the security industry, once you've gotten some experience too, it is, at least you can, like, if one group is like doesn't want to work with you very well, you can explore. It is true. And it's not worth not having a life to work in the cybersecurity industry, or like any industry really. And that, like, cyber development space is pretty hot, and it is true. And some people try to get like those like new bloods who've never worked in technology before. And there's some companies who I won't mention who just like have the highest turnover, and they're like a cybersecurity company who develops cybersecurity software, and they like hire people, and like Sweatshop got them working like 60-80 hour work weeks, and then like they just like flip them as if it's like, and not, I guess that every industry probably has companies that do that sort of thing, but you definitely see that in these dev spaces.
Yeah, the problem is big and wide and fast. It's not going to, as much as we want to think we're going to solve the problem ourselves for our company, we're not. It's so much bigger than just a single person and a team, or even a single team. It's a business. Like, how do we solve ransomware? It's still, even at the highest levels of everywhere, no one really knows how do we solve this across the board. And everyone keeps saying the same stuff inside the echo chamber, offsite backups, and do basic security hygiene and stuff. And it's, you're small and mid-sized businesses. That doesn't mean, no, it's like, to do that kind of stuff, we're bankrupt. Now we can't run a company. Like, we're done. Like, all our money is now, half our money is in the security budget to do this, our basic security essentials. It just doesn't jive with that. So how do we balance that equation is super hard. And I don't think don't put it on your back as a security engineer to solve that problem for your company. That's that's a CEO. They got to figure it out. Like, I don't know, maybe they have too many damn computers, or too many people who are doing too many stupid things. I don't know. It's a business problem more than it is a security problem.
People do what people do. People don't usually do secure things naturally anyways. And then the decision makers are the ones who it's up to anyways. So even if you give a security tool to a team where the people at the top don't care, it doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is what's that culture set to. If it's not in the culture, it's not going to make an impact.
We're going to have to drop, but thanks for the presentation and the discussion, guys.
Yeah, definitely.
If you're not on the MySec Slack channel, Discord. We're on the Discord channel. But if you're on Slack, go to our Slack channel. There should be a link there to get to the Discord channel, but you can continue a conversation there. We got a lot of channels to talk about a lot of stuff.
Yeah, thanks for having me, by the way. Appreciate it.
Yeah. I always like good conversations that I don't try to monopolize. I'm sorry.
I thought it was good conversation because I talked a lot too, so it's not just you.
Yeah. I'm just trying to drive conversation.
Totally. Yeah, so I guess if we have do we have any other last things that we want to talk about for the day or for the session?
No, I was just trying to download Ubuntu, and it's taking forever. So I guess ELK Stack is going to wait until tomorrow.
Use the torrent.
Yeah. Then I had to go have to install the uTorrent or something.
Yeah, the mirrors are always kind of slow with Ubuntu. So might want to try, if you're up for some experimentation, go with Debian. Just do the net install there. If you like the command line, you shouldn't have a problem.
I could try that. Not messed around with Debian before.
Debian, Ubuntu's based off Debian, so a lot of the commands are going to be similar. Net install is just a lot more lightweight, and it is a real quick way to get to because I think it's like 150 megabyte or 200 some megabyte download, super quick. Run that ISO, install some of the basic stuff.
We'll try that out tonight.
Yeah, or I could be real Jeff, like, well, why don't you just download Rail? That's not heavy or huge or obtrusive.
All right, gentlemen, I appreciate it as always. Have a good night.
There you go.
Have a good one.
Good one. Thank you.
I guess I could close this up in an official OWASP way as thank you for attending. We're just gonna wrap this up. We're done with our OWASP Oakland County chapter meeting. If you are not a member, I would highly recommend you to take a look at owasp.org. I think there's a discount right now for 10% of the lifetime membership. So if you want to contribute or donate, go to owasp.org and take a look at the site, look, donate, or look to become a member. If you want to give a talk or know someone who might want to give a talk about AppSec or open source development tools, security, go ahead and reach out to me or reach out to Ollie. You can find us on the Discord channel. You can find me on Twitter at Oakland CT or OWASP Oakland CT or at Nullspace. Reach out to me there. Or just wait for the next Oakland County chapter meeting. Hey, just reach out to me, or you just want to drop a chat here in this meeting right now. Feel free to do so. But thanks for attending. It was great.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's good time.
Yeah,
appreciate
thanks,
you guys.
Nato. It was a great talk. We appreciate it.
Good stuff. Have a good one.
Thanks. You guys too.
All right, guys, have a good night.
Take care.